And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is 10 Commander deck ideas. I'm just throwing this video out there. You know, this is sort of like a one-off, I think. I don't know, I might do it again. I started making this channel because I had so many deck ideas that there's no way I can make all the decks. And I just wanted to share my ideas, and maybe people will want to use those ideas, right? As I've stated in the past, I just don't have enough time for all of it. I wish I could make a deck tech video every day. I can't. It's incredibly time consuming. There's lots of other videos on this channel that people want to see. So I'm just throwing this one out there. This is 10 ideas that you can run with, okay, if you want to. These are ideas I just came up with searching through cards. Some of them are ideas that I had in the past that I thought were really cool ideas, but I just didn't really love the deck, so maybe somebody else will latch onto it and really love it. So starting out, number one, Zirda Rebels. You know, I was just searching through cards. I saw the Rebel cards and I thought, you know, there's all these Rebels that have, you know, they don't all have these activated abilities. A lot of them have these activated abilities where you pay to go get another one, right, of certain converted mana costs and put them directly into play. And I thought, man, that would be really great with Zirda, wouldn't it? I mean, Zirda goes great with a lot of things. It's a really versatile commander. It also works great with cycling if you're interested in that idea. I just thought if you want a really fringe idea for a Zirda deck, Zirda Rebels, put all those Rebels in there. They can tap for 2 less. And then because you're in red, you can put a bunch of haste enablers in there so they can come into play, and then you can immediately use them to go get another one, and you can sort of stack those abilities on top of each other. Also, this deck can use one of my favorite cards, Braid of Fire, where you have all of this mana that fills up in your mana pool during your upkeep, and you can use that mana to, you know, sink into those activated abilities that you can go get more Rebels with. Also, Hollow Burial, perfect in that deck, right? You're going to be searching your library for lots of creatures, so you want to tuck them on the bottom of your library so that you can go back and get them again. Coming in at number 2, this idea I had with land tax. I looked at land tax and I thought, man, land tax can be really, really good. It's putting so many lands in your hands, right? I've seen games where a guy had a land tax in play and he just every turn is going and getting 3 lands out of his deck and filling his hand with lands, right? What good is that for, right? You can only play 1 per turn typically, so why not use all the lands in your hands? And I thought of one of my favorite old cards, Seismic Assault. So why not combine the two? Why not combine land tax and Seismic Assault? Go get a bunch of lands out of your deck, right? So you're constantly filling your hand with lands, and then you can use them to shoot your opponents or your opponent's creatures with. And it's not just land tax. There's lots, you know, Weathered Wayfarer, Gift of Estates. There's lots of cards, and in green also. So I would probably, I think I had made this deck Naya. You can just have a whole bunch of cards that fill your hand with lands, and then you shoot your opponents with this lands, right? Molten Vortex is another one that does this. It costs 1 red mana, but still it's sort of a backup, right? You always want to have backup for effects like this. And then Ayula's Influence is another one. This one you can make bear tokens with all those lands, right? So it's always good to have backups for these effects. So having a couple of those is great. You can then take advantage of the lands in your graveyard, right? So Centaur Vinecrasher or Cavalier Flame, those are both cards that want you to have lots of lands in your graveyard. There's lots of cards like this. And then I thought, why not throw in a card like Bag of Holding, right? Which you can throw all those lands in the graveyard, but then they get exiled by Bag of Holding, and you can sack your Bag of Holding, get them all back, use them again. Surly Badgersaur is a great one that just got printed recently, that you can use that to throw all those land cards in the graveyard, and then you're getting a benefit from them. There's lots of cards that benefit you from discarding. Surly Badgersaur is going to give you treasure tokens, which is great. It actually isn't like a typical landfall deck where you want to be putting lands in play. You don't want lands in play because then your land tax doesn't work. And then I thought the really cool combo with this deck would be Creeping Renaissance, a card that used to get played a lot in Commander. I don't see much anymore. You choose a permanent type, return all cards of that type from your graveyard to your hand. So you can pitch 20 lands in the graveyard, right? And then you name land with your Creeping Renaissance. You get them all back. You get 20 land cards back that you can then reuse again. Just a really neat deck idea where you're just throwing lands like that. That's the deck. And you could do a green-red version of this with Borborygmos because he has that ability as well. It's actually even better because it does 3 damage. He has that Seismic Assault ability. You wouldn't have the white then, so you wouldn't use the land tax idea. You could do just the Gruul version of this deck. I kind of like it with white because, again, land tax, I don't think there's a card in the game that is going to constantly be putting 3 lands in your hand every single turn. Coming in at number 3, this is my Stark of Wrath Humble Defector deck idea that I can't, if you watch my combos video, this is a combo I had where I was like, okay, well, Stark of Wrath has a really powerful ability. Humble Defector has a real powerful ability. If you ignore the second part, right? Just tap to destroy an artifact or creature is fantastic. Tap to draw 2 cards is fantastic. The fact that we have to donate him to an opponent is the downside. So why not just play Homeward Path, for example? Right? If you make a deck built around those 2 cards, obviously I would do it in green. So green is going to allow you to search for those creatures, right? Because green's great at searching for creatures. Green also is great at searching for lands. So you can Sylvan Scry, go get your Homeward Path. Homeward Path, probably the best option, right? So you can tap your Humble Defector or Stark of Wrath, get the effect, then immediately tap the Homeward Path, get it back before your opponent has a chance to use it. Brooding Saurian is another one that you can use that you'll get it back at the beginning of the end step before your opponent has a chance to use it. That's basically the idea of the deck, just built around 2 cards that have similar abilities that are really powerful. I think that it's worth giving a shot. Coming in at number 4, Jacques Lever, or Jacques Lever, or however you pronounce this. People like to give me a hard time in the comments about my pronunciation of things. He has a very unique ability, and this is not an idea that I came up with. People have come up with this idea before. I just built my version of this deck. It's basically I heard one guy refer to it as a masochist deck, or stop hitting yourself. Basically, you're sort of hitting your own creatures with stuff. So you would have Pyrohemia type effects. Pyrohemia is probably the best card in the deck. And what you want is cards like Hornet's Nest and Broodhatch Nintuko, right? Where whenever they get dealt damage, you create that many green insect creature token. There's lots of cards like this that have similar effects. It depends on the colors you want to play, though. Druid's Call is another one that you can put on a creature and it creates squirrel tokens. Hungering Hydra is one that when it gets dealt damage, you put more counters on it, so it keeps getting bigger and bigger. There's lots of those. Phytohydra is another one that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know people will say, well, hey, how about Jared Carthelion for this deck? Yes, Jared Carthelion I think is a great fit in this deck, but this strategy I don't think works with him. You can use him as your commander. I like Jacques Lever better, okay, because he gives your green creatures +0/+2. Now, why is that important? First of all, you don't want to kill off your creatures, right? If you have your Broodhatch Nintuko out and he is +0/+2, that means he's a 1/3, which means you can keep pinging him with stuff with your Pyrohemia or whatever the effect is, and he's not going to die. But more importantly, the insects he's creating are not going to die because they're also green creature tokens, right? So they're going to be 1/3s as well. It doesn't really serve you much of a purpose to be creating these insect tokens that the next time you Pyrohemia, it just kills all your insect tokens that you had created before. It's sort of counterproductive, right? My buddy exited. He's now a patron, and he wanted to know, what's a good deck to put a Stuffy Doll in, right? If you want to build a deck that fits a Stuffy Doll really, really well, this is one of them. The Enrage ability also fits really well in this deck, where you're going to wanting to do damage to your creatures. And then you could put a card in like Assault Formation that each creature assigns combat damage to toughness, and you can close out the game a lot faster with that. There's just a lot of ways you can go with this deck. Coming in at number 5, Ikra, Life Gain. And I talked about this in one of my 10 cards videos. I was talking about the card Grim Feast, and I thought, maybe that card doesn't get played that much because there's not a lot of black-green Life Gain decks. Usually the Life Gain decks are in white. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting though if you made a non-white Life Gain deck, right? A black-green Life Gain deck, no white at all. I sort of like doing off-color things. And so I actually made a deck list for this one. It's Ikra and Falthis as partner commanders. I thought the commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch would work really good because we want to be getting in for damage and gaining life all the time, and that's the theme of the deck. It's just a Ikra and Falthis black-green life gain deck. It gains a ton of life. I played it a few times. I actually have a deck list for this one because I just thought the idea was so interesting that I ran with it. And so there is a deck list for this particular one in the link below if you want to check it out. Coming in at number 6, this is another one that I had in one of my 10 cards videos where I talked about Earthlink. That's such a powerful effect of whenever a creature dies, that creature's controller sacrifices a land. I thought, man, you could really build a deck around that. And as I discovered, and a lot of people commented below, Burning Sands actually is the same effect, even better. You don't have to pay the upkeep. It's mono red too. And I thought, you know what? I think there's a deck here. I think you could actually build a deck where you have no creatures and everyone else just pays for their creatures dying. And I found the absolute perfect commander for it, which is Darigaaz, because he doesn't die. So you would have only one creature in the whole deck, which would be him. And if he would die, instead you exile him. So he never dies. So you don't have to worry about paying for all that stuff that happens when creatures die. So I actually made a deck list for that one. I thought it was such a unique idea that I'd actually run with it and see if I could make a deck with it. And it actually does work. It's not nice. There's lots of sacking of lands, tainted Aethers in there. It's a pretty nasty deck, but some people like that kind of thing. That deck list also is in the description below. Coming in at number 7, Temur, Rumbling Slum, Curiosity. I don't know what to call this deck, but basically this is another idea I had a long time ago. Sigil of Sleep and Curiosity both have this unique effect where they don't care if you're dealing combat damage, they just care if you're dealing any kind of damage. And if you have a card like Rumbling Slum, which deals damage to all of your opponents all at once, and you stick a Curiosity, it really goes to town. I mean, you can obviously figure out what's going to happen here. Harsh Mentor is another one. You can play Harsh Mentor in this deck. There's lots of cards like this that are going to be dealing damage to all of your opponents. Basically, the idea is you just have a bunch of these cards that are sort of pinging your opponents for damage all the time. Electric Static Field is another one that I had in the deck that you would just put a Curiosity on, or a Sigil of Sleep or something like that. Keen Sense is another one that does the same thing, right? This is why I had it in Temur colors. It just sort of worked out that those effects that I was going for were in that colors. And you just stick it on there and you just get the advantage every time you cast an instant sorcery spell, right? Really cool deck idea. Coming in at number 8, this is a really interesting one. It's a mono white card draw deck. And I thought, I made my video about the ways to draw cards in white. And I made my video about the ways to draw cards colorlessly, both of which you can fit into a white deck, obviously. And I just thought, I bragged a lot about how my patron of the Kitsune deck draws a lot of cards, and I'm not even really trying super, super hard to do so. You really could make a mono white deck, I think, that concentrated on drawing cards and do really, really well. And I think the best commander for that is Darien. I mentioned in my mono white card draw video how Inspiring Commander is maybe the best white card draw card out there. Unfortunately, it's an arena card and technically it's not a legal paper magic card, blah, blah, blah. I think you should be able to use it if you want. You can proxy it. It is an absolute perfect fit with Darien. If someone already has a Darien deck, right? Because you want to be gaining life, right? For Darien decks, you take the damage and then you gain the life back when the creatures enter the battlefield, right? Those soldier tokens, because you're going to create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Obviously, Soul Warden goes in that deck. Everyone puts a Soul Warden or a Soul's Attendant in their Darien decks. So when you get hit for 5 damage, you take the 5, you get 5 tokens, and then you immediately gain that life back. So it essentially accomplishes nothing for your opponents to attack you. All they're doing is allowing you to make more soldier tokens. Inspiring Commander is even better, right? Because now you're going to get hit for 5 damage, you're going to gain the 5 life back and draw 5 cards. It's bananas, really, if you think about it. And Mentor of the Meek, which is also a really, really great white card draw effect, also is great for that, right? Goes in a lot of Darien decks. I just think a lot of those cards, Dawn of Hope cares about gaining life, and you're going to be gaining life in a Darien deck, so that fits really well. Well Lost Dreams is a fantastic one, again, if you're gaining life, so that fits in the deck. Skull Clamp is one of the best card draw cards ever printed, and it is perfect in the deck because you have all those 1/1 creatures. I just think you could really build a Darien deck that is concentrating on drawing cards and just really go nuts. Maybe throw a card like Hoofprints of the Stag in there because you are drawing lots of cards, I just think it would be a really funny idea to just sort of stick it to everyone and say, hey, I got a mono white deck that just draws cards like mad. Coming in at number 9, Name Death Aspect. And this is, I got a couple of ideas here. I talked about a Name Death Aspect when I was doing my Kaldheim review. I talked about the Maskwood Nexus World Tree combo that everyone was kind of excited about. I didn't think it was that great. And sort of on the spot, if you watch that video, I came up with the idea of a Name Death Aspect. You Maskwood Nexus, all the creatures in your deck you name as spirits, then you can cast your Name Death Aspect, all the creatures in your library into your graveyard, or whatever creatures you want, right? So you can have some combo in there. You can have Triskelion Mikias combo, right? There's lots of combos that you can combine there, and then use like a Living Death, or Patriarch's Bidding or something to put them all into play, right? Twilight's Call is another one that will just put all of your creatures into play, right? A lot of these aren't one-sided, but so what? Not everyone's going to have 40 creature cards in their graveyard. They're not going to have, some game-winning combo in their graveyard, so it really doesn't matter if your opponents take advantage of it. There's a lot of other things you can do, though, with an Innamed Death aspect deck. Revenant is one that this one I thought up a long time ago. I'm not saying I'm the first one to ever think of it, but Revenant is a spirit, cares about the number of creature cards in your graveyard, so you can just dump 40 creatures in your graveyard, or 50, or however many. There's well over 100 black spirits, and then you just have to reanimate the Revenant, and the Revenant's going to be like a 40-40 or a 50-50 flying, and you can just start one-shotting your opponents. Songs of the Damned, a card I just talked about, would be fantastic in this deck. So as soon as you get all those creatures in there, all you need is just 1 mana open, cast Songs of the Damned, and now you have 50 mana or whatever, and you just can go nuts with all the different things you want to be doing. You can throw Mortal Kombat in play at the beginning of your upkeep. You'll just win the game if you can manage to not have it removed. There's just a lot of ways you can really go with this. Everything I just talked about, you could do in the same deck, right? You could put 40 spirits in the deck and then also throw in Mikius and Triskelion or something like that on top of all the spirits you already have in there. So you can do the Revenant thing and you can also do the Maskwood Nexus thing, right? You can do it all in the same deck. I just think there's a whole lot of ideas there that you can really use and make a cool deck with. And lastly today, number 10, Hakon Stromgold Scourge. And I don't mean this as a commander. This is just a fantastic card. One of my personal favorites. I try to sneak it into places wherever I can. I have it in my Nimrus deck because Nimrus is a knight. You can play Hakon Stromgold Scourge from your graveyard, but not from anywhere else, right? This is what makes him a terrible commander, unfortunately, because you can't cast him from the command zone. You have to actually use, a command beacon to put him in your hand. Then you have to discard him, and then you can play him. My hat's off to anyone who actually has a Hakon Stromgold Scourge deck. So as long as Hakon is in play, though, you may cast knight cards from your graveyard. So any card in your graveyard that is a knight, you can cast it, right? And there's just a lot of really neat things you can do here. So for starters, Ashes of the Fallen. Okay, Ashes of the Fallen is a card that I don't know if anyone's ever used ever in any format. There is some uses for it though, right? What this does, when you cast this, you choose a creature type and then every creature card in your graveyard has that creature type. So it can combo with a lot of things. You can put this in your Gisa and Geralf deck and make all of the creature cards in your graveyard into zombies, and then you can cast them from your graveyard, right? There's a lot of different ways you can use this. With Hakon, obviously, you can put your Hakon in play and then Ashes of the Fallen and have whatever you want. Again, this is similar to the Innamed Death aspect. There's a little bit of crossover here, right? Where I can have a Mikius and a Triskelion or whatever in my graveyard. Ashes of the Fallen makes them all into knights, so now I can cast them all from my graveyard. I can cast any creature card in my graveyard from my graveyard with those two cards in play. So there's that. There's other little interesting interactions here, right? Like Nameless Inversion, for example. That is a card that has Changeling. That is a knight card. It has every creature type. There's a few spells like this. Crib Swap is another one. So you can just continue to cast these from your graveyard, right? If Hakon is in play, you can just keep casting Nameless Inversion from your graveyard, because when it resolves, it goes back to your graveyard, and then you can cast it again. Then it goes back to your graveyard, you cast it again, right? So things that are going to go back to your graveyard all the time are going to be super fantastic in a deck built around Hakon, right? Crib Swap, I can just keep exiling creatures and exiling creatures over and over again for every 3 mana that I have. Court Hussar is particularly fantastic. It's an actual knight, so I don't need the Changeling or the Ashes of the Fallen now. This is a knight that I think just works fantastic with Hakon. Again, because I can cast it from my graveyard. I don't pay the 1 white, so it's going to die right away, but I get that ability of looking at the top 3 cards of my library and putting one in my hand, and I can just keep doing that, right? I can do it again and again and again, just like with the Nameless Inversion. I can just keep casting it over and over and over, right? Obviously you're in Esper colors now, so Chromium has that discard ability. So I thought if you're going to have a deck around Hakon, you have to put him in the graveyard, right? This deck doesn't work at all if he's not in your hand. You have to be able to discard him. So I thought Esper colors, we have a commander that wants to discard stuff or has the ability to discard stuff. So I think that's a great commander for this build. And that would basically be the deck. Like we all know there's a zillion tutors in Esper colors, right? Again, if you want to do that with the comboing with other creatures or other creatures you want to be casting from your graveyard, maybe cards that have ETB effects like Court Hussar, you can use knights like that. Or you can also use Ashes of the Fallen to make other creatures into knights and then be able to cast them from your graveyard. I'm sure there's a whole lot of ideas here that people can come up with where repeatedly casting creatures from your graveyard is beneficial. There's also so many more changelings in the format now, so that also applies. Just a really cool, interesting deck. I had a deck similar to this before. I just think it's a lot better now because of all the other options that are available to people. So that is it. That is just 10 commander deck ideas that I had. There is a couple of deck lists here. Like I said, I have the Ikra Life Gain deck and the Darigaaz deck that are both in the description below if you want to run those. And for the rest of them, just, I gave you, I'm just giving you a base to work with. And if you think it's a really interesting idea, you can run with it. I hate these ideas to go unused. So when I come up with ideas, I have a channel now. I'll throw them out there and whoever wants to use them can use them. So that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.